Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Witness to History. Here we are, September 13th, 2020, continuing to settle into our new normal on Zoom.
Right.
But what better way than Zoom to bring these wonderful stories from the Moreland community in Shaker Heights, not only to our neighbors, but to all who want to share this opportunity to connect with one another. I want to just take a moment to do a few thank yous. I want to thank Kevin and Lee Kay for being the catalyst for us for so many initiatives such as Witness to History. I also want to thank Kamla Lewis, who's the director of Neighborhood Revitalization in Shaker Heights, who publishes the Moreland Rising newsletter, and Megan Hayes, our Shaker Heights history librarian, who is making these histories accessible online through our Shaker Heights Public Library. And of course, John, who's behind our controls, who commits his time and expertise behind the Zoom controls, thank goodness, so that I don't disconnect everybody by accident. All right. And I want to thank all of our audience here tonight for joining us again to Witness to History. This evening, I have the great pleasure of hosting Witness to History with not one, but two familiar faces in the Moreland community, Vicki Victoria.
Hello.
And Harry Levine. Hi, Vicki and Harry.
Hello.
Hi there. At a Moreland Neighbor Night a few months ago, I recall Vicki and Harry sharing their interest in leading a caravan of cars to Washington, D.C. for the March on Washington that was spearheaded by Reverend Al Sharpton. And I said to myself, I'd like to know them a little bit better. These are folks from our neighborhood whose commitment to social justice and equality would inspire them to go to the March on Washington. We know that that march and many people from outside of the Washington area were not able to go, but you know, they sparked my curiosity, but we're gonna learn a lot more about Vicki and Harry tonight. First, let me just ask the two of you, how long have you lived in the Moreland community?
18 years.
18 years.
2002?
Yes.
Yes,
18 years.
wonderful. That's wonderful. And Vicki, I'm going to start off with you. You have a wonderful story. And Harry, I know that as we've gotten to know you, we know that you're from Detroit. So we're going to learn more about that in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So Vicki, I understand you're a familiar face at Shaker Library. Tell us a little about your career.
Okay. Well, I've been a librarian most of my adult life. I started out wanting to be in political science, but to work my way through college, I was working in a children's room in the library. So I liked that a lot more than I liked political science. Hi, Max. And so I decided to get my master's, and I've worked primarily in public libraries in Ohio. I had one couple of years where I worked in the morgue at the Akron Beacon Journal. That's what they call the libraries in a newspaper, and that was a lot of fun. And then I started working in Cleveland Heights in the late 90s, and I retired from there in 2005. And now I'm a substitute at the Shaker Library, and I understand they're going to be opening their doors to the public pretty soon, which I'm looking forward to.
Yes, I saw that. It'll be exciting, exciting. And Harry, I hear you're from Detroit. And so
Yes, I am.
you have quite a story for us tonight about your years in Detroit. We're going to start off with you in a second about your teenage years. And how you were connected to some things that most of us only read about. But Vicki, I understand you were an Air Force brat. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, yes, my father started out in the, there we are, in the Army during World War II, and then he joined the Air Force after that. And our family moved to a lot of different places between the time I was born and the time and until I turned 16. We were in Maine, Vermont, Nebraska, Okinawa, We always came back to, my mother always came back, that's Okinawa. My mother always came back to Johnstown, Pennsylvania to give birth. But, and while my dad was places, he was sent places where dependents weren't allowed a couple of times. So that was our home base. But it was a very exciting and interesting life. And I'm very thankful that I was an Army brat simply because I'm from a very small town in Pennsylvania and very rural, not a lot of people from different backgrounds. And because of being in the service, I got to meet people from all walks of life. Of course, in Okinawa, there were people who were native to the island. And in Nebraska, there were a lot of Hispanic people and Native American people. And then when I moved to Ohio, I was so happy to move up to Cleveland Heights because I think that was the most diverse place that I ever lived. And when I started working, I was at the Coventry Library, and there was the janitor was deaf. The head of circulation was African American. There was a person from the Soviet Union who had migrated over when a lot of the Jewish people left the Soviet Union, and we had a person from India. So it was just wonderful to, in that small branch, have that many people of that many backgrounds.
That's wonderful. And you were able to learn so much about people around the world. My goodness, that's, I wish. I mean, so many of us, wish that we could have had such an opportunity to know so much about so many different people. Thank you. And Harry, tell us a little bit about Detroit in your teenage years. And then I'll come back to Vicki because I want to talk about Kent State, all right?
Okay.
I grew up in Detroit, about half Jewish, lily white neighborhood. Detroit is a lot more segregated than certainly the east side of Cleveland is. People don't realize that unless they've lived in both places. But in 1963, I had some friends who asked me on a Friday night to go out to this place called the Jewish Folk Chorus. Now, I can't sing to save my life. Okay.
It's true.
But I went along, and I'm really, really glad I did. It turned my life around. I met some very nice people that were of different backgrounds, and I ended up from there joining some of my friends and becoming a member of SNCC.
And SNCC is, for the people who don't know, what was SNCC?
Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. It was one of the 4 major civil rights groups in the early 60s. John Lewis was in charge of? Yes, John Lewis was in charge of that after a while, right before Stokely Carmichael, which was not, at any rate, so I became a member of that, and from there I went on a number of marches when I was about 16 and 15 and older, including the 125,000 person march on Woodward Avenue with Martin Luther King, where he first uttered the words, "I have a dream."
My goodness. Wow. Experience. Oh.
It was, I got involved in the civil rights movement, of course, and I was part of the committee to end the war in Vietnam. And again, more demonstrations, more marches.
It's a regular hippie.
Yes, I was. So irregular hippie.
Okay, I love it. I love it. Yeah, that certainly says, gives us the answer, to why it was that you said you wanted to organize a caravan to the March on Washington. You just have a long history in civil rights. Both of you do.
And it's something I really couldn't do back in the early 60s. I was too young and my parents weren't having any of it.
Yes, yes. There's always there's always our parents, and I talk to my students sometimes about generational differences, but it all works out okay in the end. I want to come back to you, Vicki. One of the things that I want to share with with our audience today is that Kevin K. Hi there, Kevin. We were having a conversation on May 4th this year, and we were really just commemorating the May 4th, 1970 killing of the 4 students at Kent State University. And so Kevin said, Vicki was there. So Vicki, I want you to share with us, as a student at Kent State, because when he told me that, I said, what? I want to learn more about your...
Someone at the desk, it might have been Megan, was mentioning that it was the 50th anniversary of Kent State. And I thought, no, I couldn't be that old. That's not possible. But yes, it was 50 years ago. And at the time,
You should point out you in that picture.
Oh, well, I can't point to it. I was pretty active in most
More to the left.
in most political things.
Left.
That's the right, hon. More to the right.
More to the right.
Do you have the hat on?
I'm the one with the hair over her face, yes.
Oh, is that you, Vicki? Oh, my goodness.
That's me. That's me.
Okay, wonderful picture.
But
it really captured you.
I was very much opposed to the war in Vietnam, and I went to most of the demonstrations. Hair over her face, yes.
Oh, is that you, Vicki? Oh, my
That's
goodness.
me. That's me.
Okay, wonderful picture.
But
it really captured you.
I was very much opposed to the war in Vietnam, and I went to most of the demonstrations that were held on campus. And I was, for my 20th birthday, Nixon sent troops into and bombed Cambodia. And that's what sparked the round of demonstrations that they had at Kent State that weekend. And many people took to the streets. It's a college town, lots of bars, so lots of people were in the streets demonstrating. People came out of the bars to see what was happening, and there was some damage done to some of the businesses. So, excuse me, unfortunately, they decided to call in the National Guard. Excuse me, let me get a drink. So when I went back to campus on Monday, which was May 4th, there were National Guard everywhere. And they had forbidden demonstrations that day, but of course that wasn't going to stop the students. So at noon, they rang the bell that was on the Commons, and everybody started to gather. Now, I was coming from a class, so I stopped kind of on the edge to see what was happening, and they started to speak, and it wasn't long before they started to speak that the general, I think, there came around on a Jeep with a bullhorn and was telling everybody to disperse, that it was an illegal gathering. And that's when the National Guard started moving towards the students and pushing them up and over the hill. The Commons would have been on the other side of Taylor Hall towards the top of that picture. That's where people had gathered. And then right beside Taylor Hall, you go toward the pagoda. That's the top of the hill. Now, I was on kind of the side of the group, so I ended up kind of going the long way around and coming up so that I was at the bottom end of what's called the practice field there on the screen. It's just all kind of all the way down where the line is of the picture, further down. Anyway, I ended up about there. We had gone around and we were coming back up because people were saying that the National Guard were turning around and leaving. So we had just there was a small rise up there, and we had just gotten over the rise, and we looked up and we saw the guardsmen that were right at the top of the hill turn around, point their guns and fire. I wasn't very smart at the time. I was pretty naive, so I thought that I was far enough away that the bullets wouldn't travel that far. We were all surprised that they were actually carrying loaded guns. I'm not sure why we were, but we were naive, as I said before. So I was just standing there, probably the full 13 seconds that they were firing, and then I noticed everyone around me was hitting the ground, so I hit the ground too. And then when the firing stopped and I looked up, it seemed like everybody on the hill was on the ground. And at that point, I thought everyone had been shot and killed. But I made my way up toward the parking lot there that was on my side of the Taylor Hall, just below the pagoda. And I know there had been ambulances on the other side of the hill, down where the National Guard had started, but people were screaming for ambulances, and it seemed to take forever for them to come. I didn't see any of the, like the famous picture of the young girl kneeling over Jeffrey Miller. I didn't see that. I think I was back further at that point, but I walked up, and I don't, your mind does funny things.
That's just an amazing, sad memory. And we're here with you. And
Thanks.
I was at Ohio State at that time. And
but anyway,
yes,
I didn't see any of the blood or the bullet holes. I just my mind protected me from that. But I did see a young man lying on the pavement, and I think it probably was Jeffrey Miller. And there were guardsmen nearby, and one of the guardsmen threw a tear gas grenade right next to his body. And during the demonstration, I had seen a lot of the protesters pick up the grenades and throw them back. So I thought I would do that. But if you've ever been in tear gas, and this was my first experience with it, it's not something easy to endure, and when you don't know what you're doing. So I made it about halfway to where he was lying, and then just the tear gas just overwhelmed me, and I turned around and went into one of the dormitories so I could wash my hands and face and remove the tear gas. And then later on, by the time I got out, the ambulances were there and taking people away. And a lot of people were gathering again on the commons because we were pretty much shocked and angry, I think. And we sat down there again, and the guards started to gather too. And that's when I think it was Glenn Frank. That's one of the more famous things of that day was he came by and he was just yelling at the students to leave. He said, get out. They won't hesitate to shoot you. Just get out. And he was very distraught, and he was yelling at everyone. And some people had to be carried away by the guards. Some of us just left. It was very, he was very emotional, and I think that got to a lot of us who were sitting there, and we decided to honor what he was saying and leave. But we really, there was no big announcement. Nobody told us what was going on. So for the rest of the day, there were just a lot of students mulling around. That's where that one picture is from that you saw earlier. People just kind of gathering and trying to figure out what was happening, what we were supposed to do. And it wasn't until much later. I mean, I always was picked up by my dad. I didn't drive, and he would come after work and pick me up. And it wasn't until much later, most of the people had gone, and I was sitting there near the 59 waiting for him to pick me up when, one of the guardsmen said, "What are you doing here?" And I told him, I was waiting for my father. And he said, "The whole city has been closed down. Yes. No one can get in and out." And so then I ended up walking about halfway home before I got a ride the rest of the way. And I lived in Ravenna at the time, so it was quite a walk.
And I know that even as we led up to the 50th commemoration of the 1970 event, and then the pandemic occurred, I know that I was paying attention to how there was concern. I think that Jane Fonda was supposed to be there.
Right.
And so I was looking forward to that, actually, to be really honest.
Well, I did visit the campus that day.
Oh, did you? Oh, yes.
And they didn't have any, there was no planned program. There were a few people doing some speeches down by the bell on the Commons. But there were just mostly a lot of people kind of commemorating the day and commemorating the people who died there and who were injured there.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing the story with us, Vicki.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. And Harry, I want to turn to you. Back to Detroit. So here you are as a teenager, and you're already in SNCC. But then you also said that you had heard Martin Luther King, or the first I Have a Speech, even before the March on Washington. But tell us a little bit about what else happened in Detroit a few years later. Some of the things that we know happened across our country.
Shortly after I met my ex-wife, which was 1967, there was a small, some people call it a riot, some people call it an insurrection. That's myself with my ex-wife and my children. We're all much older now. And we were in Ann Arbor listening to a group, and I don't know which one it was. The groups that performed at the Grandee would normally go to West Park in Ann Arbor and perform for free. And we were out there listening to that, and we were driving back, and we got off the freeway to go visit a guy who was somewhat famous in the Detroit area named John Sinclair. He lived right near Wayne's campus, basically on it. And we drove up to his house to hear, coming out of his huge speakers in his windows upstairs, the Doors song, "Light My Fire." We had no idea what was going on.
Okay.
We did see some smoke. We had no idea. One of the people who knew him was a photographer who wanted to go over to a few blocks away and at Forest and 12th Street and take some pictures. Well, and naive Harry, sure, come on, we'll drive you over. Well, here we sit outside of a gun store while he's outside the car taking pictures, and we're watching people carrying TVs and everything else in the world around.
Mm.
And it dawned on me, this shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
And finally, when they set that store on fire, I
Mm.
said, it's time to leave.
Yes.
So I called them. We went back to where John was staying, John's house, and dropped Amo was his name. Dropped him off. These two young ladies wanted to ride to Northwest Detroit. We did that. Got on the freeway. By the time we got on the freeway, and this is 6:30, 7 o'clock at night in July, I could not see past the hood of my car for the smoke.
Mm. Oh my goodness.
It was an amazing feeling, an amazing sight. Um, I went to work the next day, and I worked downtown also. And I drove back down 12th Street, which was kind of the epicenter of what was going on. And during the day, there wasn't much happening. But I saw somewhere, anybody who wants to can find pictures of Detroit after the riot. 43 people died, so they say. I think it was more. And many areas in Center City were just burned out. Stores and homes. It was pretty amazing to see that.
Yes, it was a
And to
difficult
live through it.
time.
Riot lasted 4 days until Thursday.
It was one
And
of
finally, people stopped.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right.
Pardon me?
Do you not cause the riot?
Yeah, I do know what caused the riot. There was at 3 o'clock in the morning, the police decided to raid a after-hours club.
Mm-hmm.
And some people took exception to it. They came out and started throwing rocks and bottles, and the police fired on them. And much like what was happening in Kenosha and other places, heat and anger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, frustration with being taken advantage of by the merchants in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the merchants in that area of town were all white.
Yes.
Clientele was all black, and they were a captive audience, charged whatever they wanted for inferior merchandise.
Yes. And soon after those riots, during that time, Johnson was the president and had the Kerner Commission.
Yes.
And so and whether they expected for the findings to be what they were, they said it was racism. And these communities emerged in the way that they did because of racism.
It wasn't. People, unless they were there and saw it, don't realize that it was the people in the area, white people and black people who lived in that area, who were revolting.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just a racial thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of an economic thing.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you a question, since we have recently, of course, seen protests. Of course, we have, much history. You were involved in the civil rights movement, and then in the experiences we've had recently, just your thoughts about what it is that we've been seeing in terms of the reasons that people have decided that it was time to protest against, injustices they've seen. And then in some cases, unfortunately, some of the, some similar destruction that we've seen in cities across the country. What are your thoughts about that?
My thoughts are that after many, many years, I don't care whether you want to call it 60 years or 200 years or 400 years, that there's been very little progress made.
Mm.
I can certainly understand and empathize and agree with the anger.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened when Stokely took over SNCC and some of the other civil rights groups became rather militant was that the support that was out there in the white community dissipated.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we've got to remember what happened and to try to keep that in mind in order to keep up the support that is out there now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we've just been so woefully ignorant of what has gone on in our country. I think the 1619 Project
Yes.
helped to highlight some of the history that we never hear about. And then just the seeing so many acts of violence by the authorities toward people of color, toward Black people, that more and more people started to realize that this has been going on and we just didn't know. It was so well hidden. We were kept, with our white privilege, we were kept unaware. So many people live in communities that are not segregated, that don't have a lot of diversity, and so they don't have firsthand experience. And now with cell phone cameras and seeing the things that we do on the news, as horrifying as they are, at least they've brought to light how awful the situation has been and still is.
That brings to mind something that I'm very familiar with, and that's that the war in Vietnam, until it was broadcast over TV, and until those of us who are old enough to remember watched it on the news every night, that's what changed the minds of the average Americans, if you will, and brought about the tremendous dislike for that war and actually brought an end to it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think our demonstrations helped.
Yes.
Okay, but more than anything else, what helped to bring the war to an end was when it was publicized.
Yes. In the media.
It was no longer a secret.
Freedom of the press. I mean, it's, it's one of those, rights we have to uphold forever.
Yeah.
So that we can make sure that we know what's happening in the world and what's happening with our own society. I want to move to our audience at this point. We have Vicki, Victoria, and Harry Levine with us today, and I want to open questions that anyone may have. I want to thank you all for sharing, but I want to see if anyone in our audience has any questions for you. Anybody want to chime in? Any questions? You can put them in the chat, or you can just chime in and ask questions. Oh, look at this. Wonderful. Oh, that's wonderful.
That's our wedding day.
Yes. Yes. So what's your next anniversary? What's the next anniversary that you will be celebrating? How many years have you been?
October 14th.
19
years. We'll be in northern Michigan for that one.
Oh, no.
We always take a trip on our anniversary.
That's wonderful.
Oh, what made you choose Shaker Heights?
Yes.
Moreland. Well, I first moved up here because I was working. I lived in Cuyahoga Falls, and I was working at Cleveland Heights. And for one thing, the commute was pretty awful. So I decided to get an apartment up here. And then after Harry and I met and got married, we we were just looking in this area because working in the library, I knew the neighborhood of Cleveland Heights and somewhat of Shaker Heights, and the Moreland area was just so beautiful.
Oh.
The tree-lined streets and the little bungalows. We just kind of fell in love with that. And there was a house here. We had originally were looking for a house that was what, a couple
On Shelton.
on Shelton, and then that one didn't work out. But the realtor, or we had just gone by this.
We were driving around and we saw a FHA foreclosure for sale sign.
Oh, okay.
And I called about it, and when it went down to $73,000, we jumped on it.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes. Good for Moreland. I have a question here. Like to hear about your experiences with the March on Washington. I understand you had a watch. Did you come together a few weeks ago when the march was this year?
Yeah, we decided that we weren't going to be able to. Yeah, well, with COVID and being older, not being the most healthy people in the world, we decided that it might be pretty risky to go, and we tried to see if people around here would be interested in having a demonstration in the Cleveland area. And I think we contacted the local NAACP and Black Lives Matter, and there's a county group that we've been a part of before, and demonstrated with a couple of times. And it didn't seem to be anybody was doing anything in this area. I did find that there was a bus going from Cleveland to Washington, D.C., but
that would be even worse than going to the
I
demonstration.
just didn't feel comfortable.
Yes, that's a little too close.
So it was with John and Kevin's help, we put together a program where we talked about some of the things that went on during the march. We talked about the original march in 1963 and how it compared to the march, and just invited people to share their feelings about some of the speeches they heard and just some of what was going on. And I think I thought it was a very successful meeting. I enjoyed hearing what other people had to say and sharing a little bit of our opinions with them. And I hope that we'll be able to do it again. We had hoped to do it this past Friday, but didn't quite get it together.
Oh, okay.
What gave me the idea to do that was during the march that it's pretty famous, the Selma to Montgomery March over the Pettus Bridge. In Detroit, we had a support demonstration for that at University of Detroit that had almost 10,000 people there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was the first time I ever heard the Staple Singers.
Oh, really? Oh, nice. Okay. In 65, was it at the same, during that time, 1965?
Yeah, was it
64, 63, 64.
I think
the Selma March was in 65.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so you had a march at the same, very good. Okay. So you were involved with that march?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was most of the major marches that happened, demonstrations for civil rights or against the Vietnam War, I got involved with.
Okay. Jeffrey Pearl has that question, to share your experiences and, each of you had in demonstrations.
Right. I went to two.
I got threatened once.
Yeah. I went to two marches on Washington. One was after Kent State, and it was in response to Kent State. And I think one was before that. Seems to me it would have been about 67 or 68. I'm thinking 68 after Martin Luther King had been assassinated.
Oh, really?
There was a march that that I participated in then, and we both went. It's a women's march in 2016 in Cleveland. We didn't go to Washington, but to Cleveland, and I think all of Harry's children were in a march
in Detroit,
or the surrounding areas for the women's march, and they've been. You could say that's one of the things you're proud about.
Yes, I am. I'm proud of my kids, and I raised 3 semi-hippies that are also very politically active, and that's
That's wonderful. I mean, your commitment is to social justice, civil rights, and demonstrating that, not just saying that it's a good thing. It's something that you do with your, your whole example of the commitment to what this country really should be. And, over time, of course, we know that demonstrations and marches, has been one of the ways that people can show what's on their minds and what they want this democracy to represent, what it really should,
they do make a difference.
And I am just so blown away by the people in Portland and Kenosha and other cities who continue to march, to make themselves heard until something is done. And I know there's a lot of pushback, but I think Harry and I both believe that there really needs to be reform in most police departments. I think we're pretty lucky here in Shaker, but in most large city police departments, and just a lot of training so that people aren't automatically assuming things about people simply because of their color, which is what happens over and over again.
I noticed at the bottom of the screen, I don't have my glasses on right now, so I can't read the small print, that either John or I think it was John had a question.
About Vicki, about your experiences in theater. We didn't talk about it the other day. John has the question, like to hear about your experiences in theater.
Oh, in theater? Yeah, I decided that after I got through college, there I am. That's me at the Weather Vane Theater's, production of 84 Charing Cross Road. Okay. So from the time I graduated and got my first job, I went around looking for little theater groups to join. And I was in theater, I'd say, for a good, there I am again.
That's wonderful. Nice.
That was for my portfolio in case I needed to go on a casting call.
Yes, very good, nice.
But until my late 30s, I was in Geauga County, Weather Vane, Goodyear, Coach House. Weather Vane and Coach House are both in Akron. I think Weather Vane is still operating. Wow. They have very, very good programs.
Well, that's something you can do for the rest of your life. You ever think about picking that up again anytime? There's so much local theater.
Well, I haven't done it locally, but I did when I retired from the library. One of the things I said I was going to do, I had seen this on TV years before, where they had a class where people got to perform like a cabaret act.
Oh.
And so I was looking for that in the area. And finally I found one that was offered, I don't know, it was through WCPN, but it was in their theater.
Oh, okay.
And there were about, maybe a dozen people of all ages came together. We learned, each brought our own music, and we decided, no yawning. We decided which songs we wanted to do, and we performed all of the songs in front of an audience, and it was just so much fun. And if anybody, thank you, Jeffrey.
Yes, as saw your performance and said it was great. I want to go back to this question that Mel sent to us. Says, thank you so much for this history lesson and with these past experiences. How are you coping today?
Today?
I think, going back to, we were talking about the demonstrations that you had been involved in and all. And how are you?
I wish we could be more active. But it's difficult not to be a little bit cautious nowadays. Yes. We did go to a small demonstration recently. We saw it through Jeffrey had posted it. Jeffrey Pearl had seen it, and he posted it so that we could see it. And we went to a demonstration regarding the post office. People were gathered around at different post offices, but it was because there were just small crowds at each post office, you could keep a social distance and still protest. And again, it was gratifying to see the reaction of people who drove by the post office, and were also agreeing that something had to be done to stop what was happening with DeJoy and the taking out of the post boxes and the sorting machines.
What went through my head when we were doing that was, geez, it's deja vu all over again. I thought by this time I'd be finished. But I guess you never are.
No, yes. Wouldn't that be something? I mean, it's one of those things where you have to be committed to it, and who knew, for your lifetime. But as we look back in history, we know that there have been some steps in the right direction. And, clearly the media and our technology has helped us, address, some of the things that perhaps have been happening and weren't necessarily as public, or more people that just didn't know. But again, it takes people who are really committed to stand up and stay in the fight, to really stay in the fight. I happened to drive down Green Road the other day, and I saw people at the post office, and I blew my horn, and
Good.
and my father retired from the post office, so we're post office people. I believe in the post office. Yes.
Well, and that's another thing that's has racial overtones, because it's a place where a lot of minorities can get a good paying job, and a job that's pretty safe, that you can stay in for most of your life.
Yes.
And so closing down post office or privatizing post office would hurt a lot of people.
Oh, goodness, yes.
She said history is great when you can see it firsthand.
That's wonderful. Yeah. That's absolutely wonderful.
It's great, and it's not so great.
Yeah. Well, yes. But I mean, it is, I think, really, it's very fortunate for us and for our community that your story is something that we are going to be able to have many people, whether they're with us, today or in the future, however they access information, because it's rare. It's very rare for people to have firsthand experiences.
Yes.
It's so often that, we read things in books, and we may see things even, in media. I remember when, because in 1970, I was at Ohio State, and I remember the National Guard being on campus and then hearing about Kent State. So, clearly that just made all of us very fearful, because I don't know that we necessarily related to them. We did relate to them with guns, but again, we didn't really think anything was going to happen.
No,
kind of like in our way,
more interesting and real when you, and that's true. And it's, what's a shame is that people, I think I told you this before, Donna, but we're getting the same kind of reactions now with the demonstrations and some of the things that are going on in Portland and Kenosha. That when a group of us students after like a day after Kent State or 2 days after Kent State went to a local restaurant, and we overheard people saying, oh, they should have killed them all.
Wow.
And it's just that I think that's why people need to experience things for themselves. And that's why even if you're not actually there, if you have a camera there, that makes it possible for more people to actually experience it. And then when you know what's actually happening, you can form a better opinion. And the other thing I've seen throughout my life is the ups and downs. You get, you have progress, and then you have that terrible reaction. People get fearful and shut down, and that's what's happened the last, in the last presidential election, and in the, in the past few years with the administration we have now.
Yes.
What is your mother have to say?
Mrs. Hooper has a comment. Yes. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Donna.
Yes.
I just cannot let this beautiful presentation end without telling you how much I have been impressed with Vicki and Harry. They said they've been here 18 years. I thought they'd been here longer. And I know they've gone through some ups and downs with their home, and they had to move out for a while.
Yes.
After having to repair the home. But I also, when my husband and I came into Shaker, we came mainly for the education. But we were a little disappointed because we thought we were coming into more of an integrated neighborhood. It was integrated when we moved, but slowly but surely, the other neighbors moved out for the most part, and very few are left. But they are dedicated people. I'm sure that they're sincere because as you have seen, those of us who have tried to be active in the neighborhood know that practically everything that happens with the neighborhood, you can see them, they're there. And I recall very vividly that one of their neighbors across the street from them, Mrs. Mary Butcher, she could not have survived too well without Vicki and Harry. They were truly her friends. And they have personally, they have helped Sam a lot by attending his performances. They have just been dedicated, beautiful people, and we're just lucky to have them in our neighborhood. Thank you. That's my comment.
Oh,
Thank you very much. We're lucky to be here.
yes, thank you. I think the neighborhood group, I think, is one of the best things that we've ever been involved with.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I was involved in block clubs and things like that, neighborhood watches, but they're mostly for protection of people in the neighborhood. Nothing like what we're doing with the Moreland Neighbors Group.
It's great. And I also want to say that it was really a blessing to know Mrs. Butcher. She was just delightful. And I did get to work with her for somewhere between 5 and 10 years. Oh, nice. Kind of lost track. So it's just a wonderful, and I don't know if anybody knows about this, but her husband had a wonderful collection of African-American literature and history of the AME Church.
Oh, wonderful.
And a lot of that went to Emory University. Oh, and there's a collection now in her husband's name down there.
Oh, wonderful. And they'll probably digitize that. That's wonderful. Make it accessible to everybody. I'm going to look into that.
Oh, yeah. And Megan is saying that, yeah, Mrs. Butcher wrote an autobiography, and it is at the library.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, yes. All right. All right. Well, I want to make sure that we see this comment from Jeffrey Pearl. It does become more difficult to participate in demonstrations today safely with COVID present. It is extremely important to participate in the process of voting, whether by mail or in person. That's, yes, as we've talked about, rights, and just the reminder that we all, must keep in mind at this point and help to dispel some of the confusion that, that this time period is happening right now, but we'll get through it and everything will be fine. All right, I want to offer a big thank you to Vicki, Victoria, and Harry Levine for being our witnesses to history. I mean, just absolutely, you just epitomize, that phrase, witnesses to history, and bringing this to us this evening. What is this? Mel has something she's showing to us. Both of you are wonderful.
Oh, my goodness. That's so lovely.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you, Mel. And thank you. Megan had a little comment, so thank you both.
Yeah. So nice. And I think Megan, do we have a new message here? What I want to, and John had put up the message there. If anybody's interested in being a guest on Witness to History or any questions, you can contact me directly by phone or by email. And so we're always looking forward to our second Sunday, 6 o'clock on Zoom. And I can't think of a better way to get to know our Moreland neighbors and to, I'm just really full, I really am, from the stories that you've shared with us this evening. Well,
I'm so happy that you have undertaken this project.
Oh.
I think it's wonderful. And maybe Harry and I can sit in on one of your classes someday in the future.
Well, you will. Believe me, my mind is always working and I love guest speakers. So you'll be hearing from me. It's so meaningful to students, of course, to hear from people who have firsthand knowledge of much of what we talk about. Actually, I'll be in touch. I'll be in touch.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank everyone for being with us this evening. Again, we have so many people to thank. And just want you to mark your calendar for second Sunday of next month for Witness to History. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.